All right, and welcome again. Good evening. It is so good to be in this space with each and every one of you. Good evening to some, I should say good afternoon to others. I am Edilah Jordan. I am also known as EJ. I am the Senior Director of Transformative Communities at dream.org. It is such a joy to welcome you all. We are thrilled, beyond thrilled to see all of our partners from across the country joining us today in this fight for clean, just, and accountable data centers. You all are in for a treat. So I'm really excited. For those of you who are new to our community, dream.org is a national 501c3 working at the intersections of green for all, justice for all, and tech for all. Our mission is simple yet bold. We close prison doors and open doors of opportunity into the green economy. We make sure that overlooked communities are not left behind in the biggest challenges and opportunities of our time. Today's conversation is part of that mission, and I could not be more excited to kick things off for you. But first, I'll hand it over to Tori Soriano, our digital organizing manager at dream.org, to kick things off with an icebreaker. Tori?
Hey everybody, nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces if we haven't met before. We're going to start off with a fun little icebreaker, and in a moment, I'm going to be switching to Mentimeter. If you're not familiar with Mentimeter, it's this cool, like, interactive platform where you, as the audience, can participate and kind of help with the presentation. This helps kind of bring the conversation home to you. And so I'm going to switch to show you a QR code. So if you have your phone right now, you can scan the QR code, and that will put you into this kind of interactive game. Don't worry, there's no like, it's not a race or anything. This is just a fun way to interact. So don't feel pressured, but scan the QR code, jump on in. If you can't scan the QR code, you can also go to menti.com, type in the code, and that will connect you to this interactive game and have fun with us. And so I'm going to give you a few more minutes as people join in and hop in, and then we'll do our first little icebreaker. And for those of you who might miss the QR code once I switch to the actual game and you're like, oh no, I wanted to play, this menu on top where it says menti.com with the code to join in will remain. So you could still jump in the game even if I switch. But we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So this question is, what brought you here to this data center or this call about data centers? Did you, come to our previous webinars and saw this and were like, this might be interesting. Maybe you live somewhere where you've heard a data center is coming in and you want to know more how to defend, protect your communities. Maybe a data center is a hot word now and you want to know more about what's going on. All right, I'm going to read some of these. Get educated. Someone told you about it. Thank you, sister. Worried about data centers, don't know much about them. I think that's all of us. Interested in learning more. They're trying to build one near me and would like to know more. AI being very popular and the usage of them. I want to be more informed about it. Yes, we should all be informed about this technology that seems to be commonplace now. Let me scroll down for some more. Um, we're going to be talking about MCAP soon, but there are going to many other grassroots organized climate justice groups leading similar fights across the country. Deeply concerned about the environmental impacts, what's going on, want to learn more. Kind of seems to be pretty much this is all new territory for a lot of us, and we want to learn more, as well as help us conduct research for our own selves, our communities, and the fight that's going to be coming up soon. All right. Thank you guys so much. There'll be more Mentimeter or Menti moments, as I should say, throughout the presentation, so there'll be opportunities for you to get involved. All right. You switch back here.
This is Colossus, a supercomputer that Elon Musk calls the most powerful AI training system in the world. Colossus is fueling Musk's company xAI and its large language model named Grok. The data center sits a few miles away from Boxtown, a predominantly black community in Memphis. Some Boxtown residents say that the pollution from the gas turbines that have powered Colossus over the last year is worsening their respiratory issues.
It smells like gas now, and it didn't smell like gas before Elon came.
I literally can taste it. I can taste the difference now.
Some local leaders insist that the rewards vastly outweigh any potential risks.
They've become our largest investor, xAI, in short order. People have started to look at Memphis, and we've got this burgeoning reputation as a tech and innovation hub.
Thank you for that snippet. So that video just was really laying the groundwork for why are we here today? So we're here because every day our communities are bombarded with myths, half-truths, and outright greenwashing about data centers. The promises of jobs, minimal impact, and clean energy all sound good, but the reality is it's often far more harmful to our communities than that. Data centers are invisible engines of the internet and AI, but too often they're powered by fossil fuels, guzzling enormous amounts of water, and land in communities that are facing pollution and inequities. Dream.org launched our local Stop Toxic Tech campaign in Memphis to push back on data center development without community protection. In Memphis, our partnerships and mobilization led to some real wins. Over 17,000 national petitions were signed. More than 150 people engaged in phone banking in partnership with Black Voters Matter. And we still have some strong ongoing momentum from local partners like Memphis Community Against Pollution. We expanded our local fight into a national campaign, Green the Grid. This campaign is a call for accountability, equity, and sustainability of data centers as they continue to grow rapidly across America with little to no oversight or disclosure. This isn't just about stopping the harm. It's about reshaping AI, the future of tech infrastructure, so communities benefit, not bear the cost. So today, webinar is all about busting myths and exposing the truth. What these projects are really meaning in our communities and what it takes to ensure data centers are built sustainably and responsibly. You'll hear from on the ground work from our partner in Memphis, KeShaun Pearson, Executive Director of Memphis Community Against Pollution. You'll gain insight into federal policy loopholes from Loralei Hojay, Policy Associate here at dream.org. We'll give you an opportunity to ask the questions that you would like to our panel. So we'll have a Q&A, and you'll learn how each of you can be a part of shaping a cleaner, more equitable future. So now the moment that we've all been waiting for. I am so excited to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, my colleague, Naomi Garcia Hector. Naomi is our program assistant to our chief advocacy officer here at dream.org. She is not only keeping our advocacy machine running smoothly, but she also drives special projects across campaigns at the organization. With a background spanning from elections, civic engagement, women's rights, and criminal justice, Naomi brings a justice-centered lens to everything that she touches. She is deeply committed to advancing equity and systematic change, and she'll be guiding us through this very important conversation today. Naomi?
Thanks, EJ. As she said, I'm Naomi. I'm your humble host for the evening. Let's get this party started, y'all. I'm excited to see 66 of y'all in here. I just want to remind y'all that as you have questions, because we want to be able to keep track of them and make sure that we're answering all of them, go ahead and on the bottom of your screen on your Zoom, you'll see the little button for the Q&A, the box with the question mark. Throw your questions in there. That'll make sure that once we get to the end into our Q&A, we can track all your questions and make sure that we don't miss any of them. So go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A. Alrighty, so KeShaun, can you go ahead and turn your camera on and give a wave to our group? I'm going to introduce you and we can hop right into this awesome conversation. So KeShaun Pearson is a Memphis-based leader at the forefront of the fight for environmental justice, known for making complex issues accessible to the communities most affected by them. KeShaun's advocacy began in 2020 during the Byhalia Connection pipeline fight, where he helped mobilize grassroots resistance against two multi-billion-dollar oil companies attempting to build through predominantly Black neighborhoods. Since then, KeShaun has expanded his leadership to other high-stakes battles, including organizing against Elon Musk's XAI Colossus data center project in Memphis, a fight to protect vulnerable communities from environmental harm under the guise of technological progress. And KeShaun's work sits at the crux of tech and environmental justice. And whether he's on the ground in Memphis or on the national stage, he is committed to one thing above all else, and that's putting the people first. KeShaun, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I can't wait to speak with you.
It is great to be here. Truthfully, I'm just honored to be in a position where I can fight for my community and talk and tell the truth. I think in the climate that we're in currently, the truth is being shouted below ground, and it's up to us to bring it above ground and to challenge these half-truths and these myths. And so I'm glad to be in a conversation with you about that today.
Thanks. All right, so we know all eyes are on South Memphis regarding Elon Musk's company. Again, that's XAI, and Colossus, which is the name of the supercomputer facility there. So can you just start by giving us a general overview of the project and how its operation threatens the Memphis community?
Yeah. So first of all, I have to say, this project was sprung onto the people of Memphis. We were not included in the process that brought Elon Musk here. Elon Musk was courted here by our Greater Memphis Chamber, who is supposed to represent the interests of the communities here, but instead are focused on other things, including recruiting polluters like XAI. So what is XAI? I get this question often. And a supercomputer is essentially a group of graphic processor units or computer chips that are programmed. And in this fact, it's a large language model that supports the Grok chatbot. And so the Grok chatbot uses this data. Tesla also is incorporating information from XAI. And XAI also recently purchased Twitter, right? So you have a conglomerate here that will be using the data that comes from this facility. And so this facility is also broken into two pieces. Colossus 1 is near Boxtown and has gotten most of the criticism because we continue to see them pollute at rates that we haven't seen done by any other major polluter in our area in such a short span of time. But we'll go into that a little bit later. Colossus 2 is a new facility near the border of Mississippi and Tennessee, but it is still located in 38109 and still located near a majority Black community. They have been operating unlawfully, right? The methane gas turbines at Colossus 1, and more recently we found out they have 66 methane gas turbines slated to power Colossus 2. The methane gas, right, is the real issue because when you power using a fossil fuel like methane gas, you release methane gas itself, which is a greenhouse gas, you release nitrogen oxide, and you release volatile organic compounds, right? So these are terrible chemicals for us to breathe in. And when you reach a certain level, they affect your respiratory health. And so in Southwest Memphis specifically, we have a cancer rate 4 times the national average, and our kids go to the to the emergency room more often for asthma and respiratory issues than anyone else in the state of Tennessee. So that's just a brief introduction. I hope that helps.
It definitely does. And I know we'll get more into the specifics of just how much pollution is coming out of this facility and how it's harming the Memphis community. But knowing all of this and how much harmful stuff is happening on the front lines in South Memphis, it does really raise that question of like, how the heck did Elon Musk and his company even get approval to construct and operate such an environmentally harmful and polluting facility? And how did disinformation play a role in this being allowed?
So, and I think this is a question that we run into often because there are two pools of thought, right? Is let's shut this down completely, or let's figure out why we can't, or what the obstacles are to shutting this facility down. And so for me, I work backwards, right? And so I've been a part of this fight since June of 2024. I mean, yes, June of 2024. So it's been over a year that I have lobbied to the Tennessee Valley Authority, to the White House Environmental Justice Action Council, and unfortunately, to no avail, right? This project was announced to our community. It was announced to majority of our politicians and our legislators, our own city council and our county commission, right? We have a dual government here. The state representative is my brother, Representative Justin J. Pearson, and he was also not included. I mean, we can go as far as to say that our Shelby County Health Department, who would be the oversight for the polluting of the methane gas turbines, was also not included in the decision making and the bringing of this organization here. And so, how does that happen, right? How can you just build a facility like this when you need a permit, to build a ice cream stand? But these folks were able to not only purchase a facility, but also put up between 15 and 33 methane gas turbines without a single permit. A couple of reasons. And so one major one is that they had the ear, right? And they had the backing of our mayor, Paul Young. They also had the wealthiest folks in our community in the Chamber of Commerce who were backing them. On top of that, and why that's important is because they were able to get zoning permits without any public engagement. And what we know about large scale projects like this one is that the community should be involved before these plans are announced. And so our zoning laws allow for, the purchase of these facilities and certain by right uses. And so utilizing this exploitation with misinformation and the lack of information and engagement really put our community really at a disadvantage with being able to decide what we want to happen. On top of that, like I said, the Shelby County Health Department wasn't engaged. And so there's a huge air pollution disconnect because our Shelby County Health Department, hadn't worked with the city to determine exactly what type of permitting process was needed. And so we worked to get the attention of the Environmental Protection Agency through the Southern Environmental Law Center, who supports us. So we, are continuing to try everything that we can at that point. And that's the reason why they were able to really move in the way that they were, because when they do have the support of the people who are being trusted to protect communities and to inform communities, that makes it even more difficult. But it is not impossible. It is never impossible for us to change things. And we'll talk more about that later. But the disinformation is one of the huge pieces about what is happening in our area. One of the largest disinformation pieces that even Bobby White talked about, who was shown in the video, is the economics, right? That somehow, some way, because of this data center, Memphis is now a burgeoning empire of technical progress. That's just simply completely untrue. Data centers do not create jobs. Software companies create. Well, that's a whole different theology because I don't think people create jobs. Jobs come from the community. But ultimately, Memphis, in and of itself, does not materially benefit from this project in a way that's being talked about, right? And so the economics of the project is that there are no long-term jobs, and they are using contractors from Texas and from other places in order to build the facility. Economically, we won't see a material benefit because the people in the city of Memphis aren't being hired. The jobs that we're being hired for are security jobs and for janitorial jobs. There will be, at best, 20 or so folks who will work at this facility, and based on the specifics of the types of jobs that they will offer, they're not looking at us. And they're definitely not looking at the families and the folks in 38109. And that's a huge issue. But that's the first thing that they lead with, is the economics. And then it's the consistent downplaying of how detrimental the pollution is. At this point, they have released 2 studies, both utilizing a professor at the University of Memphis to basically say that the pollution that XAI is putting out is negligible. And it's really infuriating because, just like in the video, Alexis Humphreys, the woman pictured, our community is suffering at an exacerbated pace over the last 12 months. We have actual family members, we have actual community members who have died in the past 12 months, right? And we have actual data based on NASA equipment and studies from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville that show that we have a pre-XAI pollution period and a post-XAI pollution period. In the post-XAI pollution period, over the last 12 months, they have increased our peak nitrogen oxide levels by 79%. On top of that, it's been done illegally and unlawfully, right? They don't have a single permit for this. And so the disinformation around the catastrophic ways that pollution like nitrogen oxide affects our lives, the amount of pollution that XAI has been pushing out, right? Tons of nitrogen oxide over a single year, more than our Memphis International Airport, right? That is a type of disinformation that is exploiting not only our environment, but also our health.
Thanks, KeShaun. So yeah, overall, I'm hearing like these AI infrastructure projects, or infrastructure projects in general, are supposed to go through a strict regulatory process and a permitting process that try to make sure that they're not harming the communities that they're around. And in this case with Colossus, so many corners have been cut and the community has been shut out, and that's causing a lot of problems and a lot of harm to the people on the front lines. You spoke a little bit specifically just about like the misleading economic claims that it's going to bring jobs, and I know that this is something that comes not just, you know, for the Colossus supercomputer facility, but also it's a claim that a lot of other tech companies are making for other data center facilities that are being proposed and are being operated across the country. So thank you for giving us more context with that. I'm wondering if you want to go a little bit more into the fact that that this Colossus facility has its own power plant, and talk a little bit about those methane gas turbines and some of the misleading claims or even lies that have been found to be going around about that.
Trust me, listen, we could talk about the lies that people put out for a while. And so I'll just briefly touch on and just dive a little bit more into the tactics that are being used, right, to confuse people, to pass the myths along. We've, in our community in Boxtown, in Westwood, we received mailers that actually walked us through and showed us, you know, what a turbine looks like the actual photos of a turbine, and talked about, you know, it's fear mongering to talk about the pollution and the, you know, how it's degrading our atmosphere and our environment. And that is not so bad, right? It is a cruel thing to tell somebody that they are suffering, and then you hand out flyers in their mailboxes that says your suffering isn't that bad, right? It is this continual suppression and oppression that is happening, and it is being guided by these huge corporations who have the means, right? Paying for mailers is extremely expensive. And so they do have the means, but they also are utilizing narratives that confuse people. And that one is facts over fear, right? And so they elaborate on so much of what the turbines do that they continuously neglect what the pollution and the outcomes are. But I'll talk about, so the one of the myths is that they have done everything that they were supposed to do to be able to set these turbines up. The truth is that that's inaccurate, right? They are claiming that a non-road exemption, which allows for power plant, well, that allows for you to use large generators in the event of a mass disaster, right? No mass disaster has happened, knock on wood, thank God. And XAI is trying to use that same exemption for having these turbines on site. And that we know that doesn't apply for them. And so, it's nothing but a greenwashing PR style campaign that really speaks to the confirmation bias, because folks do want to believe, that they are being cared for, but this is not happening.
I see. Yeah, and KeShaun, I'm gonna jump to one of our last questions here because I know we have other sections and a Q&A and lots of questions coming in, so I want to make sure we have time for that. But the last thing that I'd ask of you is, so we know that what's going on in the backyard in South Memphis and all the pollution that's happening from data centers and the harm from data centers is unfortunately not only happening in Memphis, it's happening across the country. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from the grassroots organizing you've helped to lead in Memphis, and how might these lessons translate to other communities pushing to protect themselves from data centers?
Yep, thank you. And I know, listen, my dad's a pastor, so I can get long-winded, y'all. And so I do appreciate you moving to the specific section. The truth is that if you don't have a data center around you, you will. And 9 times out of 10, there is a data center. It just may not be the largest data center on the planet, like what we have in Memphis. And so first, I want to recognize the fact that there have been huge wins in Arizona and Georgia pushing back against data centers. And some of the things that we've collectively learned is that if you look for power connections that are massive, around 100 megawatts or more, that are for sale, that might be an indicator. You also want to look at zoning and development applications for different purchases of land that are for huge buildings. That may also help. You also want to decode who these companies are. Google, XAI, they all have DBA names, or doing business as names. XAI goes by CTC. And so learn what those names are and look for that in the details. Be proactive in zoning updates and demand public input and processing. Be proactive in pollution control permitting updates as well. More stringent permitting will also protect your community. And so those are just a few of the things that we've learned, and I hope that it can help really protect any other community from what we're experiencing here in Memphis.
Yeah, this is data centers, like the proliferation of this AI infrastructure has happened so quickly that I think a lot of us are trying to figure out on the fly how the heck we even fight back. And so I know this is a lot of information and it's dense, and maybe we need to have more webinars and focus on more specific parts of this issue because there's so much to it. But thank you so much for that, KeShaun. We're going to jump into a mentee moment so we can have y'all take some guess about some stats and the ways that data centers are affecting communities. Maybe you'll be surprised to see some of these numbers. And then we'll jump into our next section. So you can go ahead and scan that QR code. And don't worry, KeShaun will be back later to answer some of the questions that we see in the chat. There's a lot of good ones thus far. So we'll wait just a couple seconds for y'all to get back in here. And again, if you miss any of these, don't worry. It's just a fun way to keep y'all engaged and show y'all some of the stats that we've come across in our research that we find concerning or that show us the scope of this issue. All right, so this first one here, how many gallons of water could y'all guess that large data centers consume per day? Any guesses? 8. Yeah, I see somebody in the chat said 8 million gallons per day. Okay, I see a lot of different answers. Awesome. A lot of different guesses. More than the scale allows, Avi. Good answer. Alrighty, let's go ahead and see what the right answer is. Oh, is it showing us the right answer?
I don't think it shows us the right answer, right? I think it just shows us what we think people are estimating.
Try hitting
Oh.
enter.
There we go. Perfect. So around 9 to 11 or 10, it says 10 million gallons of water per day. So if you were in that range, congrats, you were right. It is on the larger end of the scale, concerningly. Yeah, Deborah, you were correct. Good guess there. Maybe you already knew. Alrighty, let's go into this next one. Take a guess, how many billions of dollars is expected from the public health cost due to data center air pollution? Guesses here. I can see we're now all skewing to the right end of the greater end of the scale here. I think I'd do the same based on our last answer. Can we see the right answer, Tori? There we go. Looks like 10 billion is the expected public health cost due to data center air pollution. That is crazy. Thanks for those stats and giving us a break here to engage, Tori. We are going to now jump back into our next part of the panel. And I'm really excited for this because we've talked a lot about permits and some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes in terms of policy when it pertains to data centers. And I know that this is dense stuff and it can get confusing. So I am excited to welcome my friend and colleague here at dream.org, Loralei Hojay. She'll turn her camera on in a second here. And Loralei is our policy associate who works with our government affairs team on legislative and policy research. Before joining Dream, she spent years in DC working on federal policy issues related to economic justice and energy and infrastructure. She previously served the Domestic Policy Council at the White House under the Biden-Harris administration, as well as the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And today, she's going to walk us through some of the ins and outs of energy and infrastructure, what it takes to get permitting approval for data centers, and how weakened federal policies will allow the data center industry to build facilities that disrupt and harm communities. Loralei?
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm going to try to keep this as high level as humanly possible, but I do tend to get a little jargony, so please send your questions if you have any.
Yes, Lorelei's our policy geek. But all good things. She can help break things down for us. So let's dive into this first question, Rory. So before a new project like a data center can even be built, what we've heard from KeShaun is that it has to go through a permitting process. It has to get permits in order to be constructed or to be proposed. And so can you walk us through what that process looks like at the federal level?
So before an energy or an infrastructure project can be even constructed, and that would include any project from renewable energy projects, oil and gas projects, pipelines, power plants, electric transmission, highways, and of course, data center developments. Any of these projects have to apply and be approved for multiple layers of permits at the federal, state, and the local level. The permitting process for any energy and infrastructure project is extremely complex and can take anywhere between 4 years to, in some cases, 20 years to complete. Today, though, we're just going to focus specifically on federal permitting processes and how those permitting regulations impact data center development specifically. But know that many of these federal regulations interact with additional state-specific regulations to shape the permitting process. And I wish we had more time to discuss that today. But data centers are special and they pose a permitting challenge due to their significant infrastructure needs. So that includes things like high energy and water consumption, extremely large land footprints, and extensive power generation and backup systems. And all of these things require approvals and regulation by the federal, state, and local government. So, for example, data centers are major energy users, and connecting them to the grid can strain local power infrastructure, and it often requires utility approvals. That would constitute a permitting process. Large volumes of water are needed for the cooling systems that data centers use. That would require water rights and water approvals to ensure water supply and the management of wastewater. That's a permitting problem. Backup generators and power generation facilities can cause toxic air emissions, requiring permits and compliance with federal regulations, especially those governing nitrogen oxide emissions, which brings in another layer of permits. So at the federal level, there's a slew of protections that project developers have to adhere to. The major federal protections that I want to focus on today include the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA for short, the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Water Act. These laws are all meant to protect public health and the environment while new projects are being planned and built. Before we get into that, though, I want to make it really clear that we're not arguing for or against reforms to these regulations, and permitting reform doesn't have to be bad or scary, and it can be a positive thing if it's done well and with thought. We absolutely should be considering changes to our permitting regulatory environment to allow for infrastructure and energy build out. But with that being said, data centers are a very specific type of infrastructure project that pose a very different set of needs and considerations than, say, a solar project or a highway. And those changes need to be considered when we discuss permitting policy and the proposed reforms.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So you mentioned what you called NEPA, which is the acronym for the National Environmental Policy Act. Can you talk just a little bit about what it is and how it relates to data centers? Because from my knowledge, I know it's designed to safeguard communities where data centers, or it can help safeguard communities where data centers are being proposed. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So NEPA is a purely procedural law, and it requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impacts of any proposed major action. So something like a construction project or a land use decision, and of course, permit approvals. And NEPA really aims to promote a balance between development and environmental protection. Unlike other federal permitting regulations, NEPA does not mandate particular outcomes or standards, and it does not set strict limits or rules. What NEPA does do is it establishes a framework for evaluating potential effects of major actions, such as the issuance of permits for infrastructure projects. And in essence, NEPA requires agencies to study the impacts of a project, consider alternatives, and give the public a chance to weigh in before permits or approvals are finalized. NEPA reviews have to look not just at the direct impacts of a project, but also at the ripple effects when combined with other developments. And agencies are required to look at the ways to reduce harm to people and the environment. And because agencies have to complete NEPA reviews before issuing final decisions, the NEPA review process often drives the entire permitting timeline. So you can think of NEPA as sort of the comprehensive environmental health check before a project can move forward with its final permits and approvals.
Okay, so before a data center can be constructed, it has to go through a permitting process. And one of the current regulations, or one of the current policies or acts that helps to regulate and make sure, try to figure out what any potential environmental impacts there could be on a community where a data center is coming to, that's where the permits come in. They would try to check and see what type of effects would be happening from this new infrastructure project, the data center, and the community. Does that sound about right?
Pretty much, more or less.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit then about some of the other things that are in place from a policy perspective to try to protect communities. Maybe people are familiar or have heard with, maybe in passing, the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Are these regulations that can connect to data centers, or can they protect communities at all? Do they try to?
So I'll start with Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act establishes national ambient air quality standards for 6 major pollutants. That includes carbon monoxide, ground level ozone, lead, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide, all of which can significantly impact public health. So the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, requires states to then develop implementation plans to meet the emission standards that are set under the Clean Air Act. And it mandates that states establish permitting programs to control emissions from new and modified sources. And that would include emission sources at data centers like the gas turbines at the XAI campus in Memphis. The attainment status of an area refers to how the ambient pollutant concentrations in that area compare to federal standards. So basically, the attainment status of a location refers to whether local air meets federal air quality standards. Many locations in the United States are considered non-attainment for ozone and particulate matter, including Memphis. Air quality regulations for non-attainment areas are generally stricter than they are in attainment areas. So for example, if a data center is in an attainment area, they might have allowable emissions of up to 250 tons per year of a regulated pollutant before triggering a major new source review under the Clean Air Act. In non-attainment areas, though, that threshold might be lower. It might be 100 tons per year or less, depending on the severity of the area's non-attainment status. So basically, a data center can potentially pollute more in an attainment area than it could in a non-attainment area before triggering an investigation. The XAI data center facility in Memphis, for example, and KeShaun talked about this a little bit, has had multiple gas turbines on the property for more than a year. It's been alleged that the campus has up to 35 gas turbines on site, which are capable of generating more than 420 megawatts of electricity. And those 35 turbines can emit between 1,000 to 2,100 tons of nitrogen oxides, which again are reactive gases that irritate human airways in high concentrations. These turbines are well above the 250-ton threshold that is established under the Clean Air Act. And in addition, the region that the XAI data center is located in has been in non-attainment status since 2015. In a case like this, I would say that the Clean Air Act implications are glaring. But under the current administration, EPA has announced that it intends to influence permitting reform to cut down perceived barriers to data center development. EPA Administrator Zeldin is on record stating that it is EPA's intention to influence air permitting in certain ways. And I think that people should expect sweeping proposals to change federal air permitting under the Clean Air Act for the express purpose of expediting and facilitating data center development. And Congress is also currently proposing a series of bills that would amend new source review provisions under the Clean Air Act, such as the New Source Review Permitting Improvement Act that was recently introduced by Representative Griffith. So these are all things that people should be aware of as the Clean Air Act sort of changes and is tweaked with at the federal level. I should jump to Clean Water Act. Clean Water Act is the primary federal law regulating surface water pollution, and it's established to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of waters of the United States. It prohibits the discharge of pollutants from point sources, and a point source is a single identifiable source of pollution like a pipe or a ditch. And it prohibits the discharge of pollutants from point sources without a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, which is essentially a Clean Water Act permit. Clean Water Act has 3 key provisions. There's Section 401, Section 402, and Section 404. For now, I want to focus on Section 404. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act regulates the discharge of dredged or fill material into navigable waters of the United States, and it covers activities like pipeline projects, levees and dams, mining projects, and infrastructure development. Applicants have to obtain a 404 permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers before they can begin activities. But the Clean Water Act 404 permitting program has had a developer target on its back for a pretty long time. There was a Supreme Court case in 2023 which dealt a major blow to the reach of the Clean Water Act. And that case was based on a 404 permitting issue. That ruling, or the result of that ruling, is part of why we may be seeing so many companies choosing to build data centers in dry states like Arizona, where there are several waters that have lost their jurisdictional reach under the Clean Water Act. And from a permitting perspective, it's easier to pave over the desert and avoid Clean Water Act 404 permitting processes. Also, under Section 404, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers can issue nationwide permits. These are general permits that authorize minor activities with minimal impacts on the aquatic environment, and it streamlines the regulatory process for small-scale projects that would otherwise require a more involved individual permit. These permits are issued on a nationwide basis, and they cover a variety of activities from minor dredging and maintenance to larger residential and commercial projects. But really, nationwide permits reduce the need for extensive review and reporting that would otherwise be required under a different type of permit. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will then periodically review and reissue the nationwide permit to make sure that they're still current and reflect current policies and environmental conditions. the Trump administration has called for a nationwide 404 clean water permit specifically for data centers. If that is something that EPA and Congress seriously pursue, given the fact that the impact of data centers on water quality is still pretty premature and is still being researched and analyzed, it does seem a bit early to ask for a nationwide permit that would then allow data centers to be developed at an accelerated timeline and with less stringent regulatory review requirements.
So it sounds like there's policy that is supposed to protect our communities from the effects of things like data centers. Of course, data centers are a novel issue, but what you're saying is most concerning here is the fact that there have been attempts at, or some of them already successful, to roll back the federal protections that protect our communities under this banner of streamlining data center development. And that can be a real concern for our communities overall. That was a lot. And we know you're a resident policy expert. So thank you for breaking things down for us. And for y'all in the crowd, Lorelei is great at helping people like me who are even learning about these new issues to know what's going on in Congress and know what's going on behind the scenes in policy. Because the reality is, with an issue like this, there is so much going on behind the scenes and trying to change different policies and trying to change different regulations to make it easier for data centers to exist. And that's scary and threatening to our frontline communities where data centers are popping up, and they're popping up more and more across the country. So obviously a lot more of a conversation to have here, but we want to be able to bring back KeShaun and have both of our panelists on screen so we can hopefully take a few of the questions. There's probably going to be way more than we can get to, but we hope to answer a few for y'all. KeShaun, were there any you were looking at in the chat that you knew you wanted to talk about, or I can call some out for you as well?
Yeah. Nathan Townsend Levy. The question says, KeShaun and Naomi, what do we say to people who say Southwest Memphis has a high cancer rate because lots of people make bad choices and eat lots of junk food and smoke a lot of cigarettes? How do we prove to them that this is caused by data centers? And so one of the most incredulous things I've ever seen was the director of the Shelby County Health Department say that it was people's personal actions that caused a 4.1 times the national average increase in cancer rates and not the 17 toxic release facilities, right? But what I will also offer here is that this is a legacy of pollution in Southwest Memphis. And as I mentioned before, there are 17 toxic release facilities in the area. And so it is a chronic public health burden that people are breathing in toxins like ethylene oxide, nitrogen oxide from the Tennessee Valley Authority, Valero Oil Refinery, and toxins coming from places like the Maxim wastewater treatment facility. So XAI and their pollution is compounding what folks are already experiencing. And so that's where I would point folks and just elaborate on that point, is that we don't need any more pollution in Southwest Memphis. Anything other than reduction is causing more harm.
Thanks, KeShaun. And I want to look at some of these other questions here and see what we can get into within the time that we have. I know we're running short. Melanie Phoenix was asking, what can we do as individuals to stop data centers and push for environmental improvements? Does it help at all for individuals to refuse to use AI as much as possible?
I definitely want to say that from a permitting policy perspective, at the federal level, yes, this administration seems poised to facilitate data center development by severely reducing permitting regulations. And industry is lobbying hard, and this administration is ready to deliver that to them. But you have to know that even as federal changes develop, your state and local governments are statutorily obligated to protect you and your communities under existing regulations. And in many cases, state and local agencies have even more power than the federal government to demand transparency and cost allocation measures to protect you against rising energy prices that happen because of these data centers. They have the right to demand accountability measures and environmental responsibility. So regardless of the way that the federal conversation is shaping up, there are other levels of government and there are other agencies at other levels of government that are developing their own sets of policies that should be designed to protect you. And you shouldn't be afraid to engage with your state and local leaders and your state and local clean air agencies who do have the authority to regulate, even if the federal government will not. And that's why work like KeShaun's is so important. And I really encourage the audience to take heart in the fact that even in this federal policy climate, there are other avenues to demand the protections that you and your communities deserve, especially at the state and local level.
Thank you so much, Lorelei. And I see quite a few questions just about like, what can we do? All of this is scary. How can I learn more and how can I get involved? It's obviously so much more, as y'all can see, than what we could even begin to cover in 1 hour. And we want to recognize that. So I want to pass it over really quickly to my colleague who can talk more about how y'all can get involved and how you all can try to fight back about toxic tech and all the things that are happening with data centers.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Hey, everyone. My name is Harrison Ribeiro. I'm the Director of Organizing and Membership. I've been with Dream going on 6 years now. And I know that was a lot of dispiriting information, but knowledge is power. And I hope that you leave this call feeling energized and excited to plug into the fight. So I know time is short. I'll get right to it. If you would like to join the national movement, to advocate for sensible, human-centered approaches to data centers, whether you're based in Arizona, Virginia, Memphis, or anywhere. These data centers are popping up all over the country. We'd love for you to join us and get involved in the Green the Grid campaign. And you can do that by scanning this QR code that you see on your screen. I will also drop a suite of links in the chat down below, including a wonderful educational organizing toolkit put together by Kairos and Media Justice that has a lot of very jarring statistics on the breadth of these data centers. Thank you, Tori. You can see them on your screen here, thanks to this graphic from Visual Capitalist. Northern Virginia is a hotbed of data centers, but you can see there are other ones popping up all over the country that are worth keeping tabs on, and there may be one popping up in your neighborhood. If we go back to the other slide, just really quickly wanted to cover some of the things that we have coming down the pipeline. You can join us to phone bank the Memphis community and educate them on what's going on with people like KeShaun and some of our partners at Black Voters Matter to make sure they know more information than what the industry is spilling to them, and the right information. We're also going to have some community events and opportunities for young people to get involved, as well as more initiatives to support the wonderful work that people are doing all over the country, like Memphis Community Against Pollution. We have social toolkits for you all to help us get out the word. And once you sign up, there is actually a space where you can let us know if you've been impacted by a data center yourself. And, the more people that we have in our network that have been directly impacted by this, that we can elevate and resource, train. We run lots of advocacy trainings throughout the year. We'd love to get to know you and go from there. So without further ado, I really want to just thank everybody for your time and attention. I know this is dense material at times, but it's so urgent. I'm going to pass it back to my dear colleague, EJ.
Thank you so much, Harrison. And thank you to our moderator and our amazing panelists. Such a fruitful conversation that I know can just continue on. So as we close this MythBuster, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to all of you for joining us. I know for some of you it's late in the evening, so thank you so much. Your time, your energy, and commitment to uncovering the truths behind data center narrative means so much, not only to dream.org, but all the communities that you all represent who are directly impacted. And we've heard some powerful insight from all of our speakers and seen how grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and coalition building come together to drive real change. And so the fight for sustainable community-centered data centers is just beginning. It takes each and every one of you and us, right? And so to ensure that projects are built responsibly, equitably, and with accountability. So, as Harrison has mentioned, please, please, please stay engaged with us. Sign petitions. You'll get some, some digital mailers out to you all. Sign those petitions. Share stories, connect with local partners, bring others into this work. Together, we can green the grid and hold data centers accountable and make sure that our communities don't just survive this transition, but truly thrive in it. Again, thank you and for being with us today. And we look forward to building this movement alongside each of you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.